You may believe from what you see on camera that we've got stuff figured out, but actually, this place is a disaster. We've been waiting on sound treatment material for our microphones, shelves for organization, but most workflow breaking, we've had a crappy networking setup. This is the state of our networking. It is just a Google Fiber issued modem, router, and access point. This is all we've been using. It's all been Wi-Fi, and it's all been miserable. We used to edit our videos live off of the server thanks to Margaret, the 336 terabyte server I built a while ago. But there are three problems with Margaret. It uses an extraordinary amount of power, it makes an extraordinary amount of heat, and it makes an extraordinary amount of noise. We are in a much smaller enclosed location than the old place, and we already struggle with noise from neighbors and construction nearby. We don't want to add a server to that. But that means that we've been using a Synology to back up terabytes of information overnight, and it takes like 24 hours, and it's a horrible, crappy system. We needed a server, and luckily our friends at IX Systems said, hey, we think we've got the perfect solution for your setup. It's here, it looks freaking awesome, but I'm not talking about it in this video yet because we are not even ready to put that thing in. There's no networking done, so we gotta figure that out. Okay, so here's the grand plan. Step number one is to retrofit all of the cables. This is by far the suckiest part, and luckily, I don't have to do step one because unlike my home networking retrofit, this time around when I reached out to my landlord asking if I could do it, he said, I'll just pay an electrician to come do that. So thank you to the landlord. I did tell him to save a little bit of money though in step two. They left those cables all unterminated, so we need to terminate the cables on both ends. Then, once we've done that, step number three comes, which is installing everything into our brand new, very large server rack that we thought we could take up the stairs by ourselves, but we ended up needing to hire a 5-person moving company to do. And then we move on to step number four, installing everything else inside. This not only includes mounting our stuff inside of the rack, but installing our wireless access points and even our door control system. This is going to be exciting. Let's begin. Before we put a connector on the tip of the Ethernet cable, we need to understand what's inside the Ethernet cable. And while they're all basically identical, there is some variance based on your category rating. The most common type of Ethernet is Cat5e. It's been a standard for 30 years, a very long time. We are installing Cat6a, which is the last generation of UTP, or unshielded twisted pairs. And that's because inside there are 4 pairs of wire, 8 conductors in total, a little plastic splitter right here, and a little piece of yarn that allows us to pull the jacket. But that's it. It's unshielded. It's just there. Newer generations of cable, like Cat6a and later, are referred to as FUTP. They're the same except for they have foil wrapped around the pairs themselves and then around the entire jacket. And the idea is that this is a really old technology. It's just copper and it's been around for decades. It was never really designed to communicate the type of speeds and the distances that we are used to using today. And so for very, very, very fast network connections across very long distances, you need fancier cable. But in a deployment like this, an office, or like your home, you likely don't need fancy pants cable. Not only is it more expensive, but it's a lot more difficult to work with. I decided to opt for Cat6 because in so much as you can terminate it correctly, which I will show you how to do, you can easily go 40 meters plus while pushing 10 gigs, which is more than probably any single run you'll do in your home. Certainly more than we'll be doing here in the office. It's cheaper, it's easier to work with, and I'm going to show you how to do it. Once you've stripped the last few inches of jacketing off of your cable, you will once again find 4 twisted pairs. Now it comes in 4 colors, green, orange, brown, and blue. And inside of each twisted pair, you will have a solid color as well as a striped color. Now note that these are twisted differently. That is by design. And we want to untwist them as little as possible when we create a connector. Because while in theory, I could say put solid blue on connector 1, and then on the other end of the cable, put solid blue on connector 1, and we would theoretically get a data connection, these are twisted on purpose to cross-cancel and to reduce noise and a bunch of other stuff we don't really want to mess with. So there is a specific order you do need to put these cables in. It's called T568B, and it's been in use since the early 1990s. It's pretty much a guarantee that any Ethernet cable in your house uses this standard. And it is striped orange, orange, striped green, blue, striped blue, green, striped brown, brown. And so all you have to do is take these pairs and untwist them, once again, the littlest amount that you can. And here's a pro tip for you. If you take the jacket that you just stripped off, you can just twist it, and this untwist the cable for you. Ha ha ha, nice. So we're gonna untwist all 4 of these as little as we can, and then put them in the correct order. Okay, so I have got all 8 conductors in the right order, and you'll see that I've kind of twisted them out to get them straight. That'll make it easy to insert into the connector. And then I just have to cut off the end so that I've got my straight edge ready to go. And now I take my connector. Now there are 2 types of connectors. There's a traditional connector, and then there's what this connector is, which is called a pass-through connector. And it is so called because, well, you'll see that the cable actually passes through. This is a benefit because you don't have to make sure by looking through this tiny little window if you got the right colors. You can just go through and see if it checks the order, and ours does. We've got stripy orange, orange, stripy green, blue, stripy blue, green, stripy brown, brown. And so I just shove this connector all the way up in, and you'll see that again, there's a bit of clumping down here because I have untwisted this in the littlest amount that I can afford to. And once I have inserted that into the connector, I just take my crimping tool here, I stick my Ethernet cable through, and in one fell swoop, it will not only trim this cable, but it will also crimp the connector so that now I have a solidly affixed Ethernet cable. And that's it. We just terminated a bunch of cable inside of the studio with our workbench computer as well as our 3D printers. We did it down by the front door for access control. We did it in my office for my computer and my telephone. We did it in the editing studio for that workstation and a bunch more. And we've got cable coming everywhere through interior walls, through exterior walls, and even surface mounted to the ceiling. I don't want to have to put little tiny Ethernet jacks on every single one of them, and luckily I don't have to because of something like this. This is called a patch panel. And remember how I mentioned that, well, cable's getting fancy and has foil wrapped around it? This type of patch panel, a punch-down panel, is unfortunately a dying breed because it's freaking awesome. Starting with Cat6a and later, you will need shielded keystone connectors that you just put into a stupid little piece of sheet metal. But this is awesome, and let me show you why. All right, so I've got a cable coming from the studio. I'm gonna call it number 6. Right here, there are 4 slots on the top and on the bottom for me to put my twisted pairs. Now I want to untwist these as little as I possibly can while still getting them into the place that they need to be. So I'm gonna line those up right now. Okay, so as you can see, I have untwisted these cables the minimum amount that I can get away with. I've placed them into their respective slots, and now I just take this cool little punch down tool and I, well, punch it down. And it's as easy as that. Rinse and repeat. Now that we've got our rack populated, it is time to talk about what is in here and also what is not in here. The most obvious omission is, again, our new 4U server from IX Systems running TrueNAS. We will be talking about that in a future video. Get subscribed, it's going to be fantastic. Above that is something that we've actually already talked about before on this channel. It is an Lto Backup Drive. Believe it or not, companies around the world, including Snazzy Labs, are using magnetic tapes for storage backup. Why? This video answers that question. It's really fascinating technology. Then down here at the bottom, we have the world's biggest scam, UPSs, Universal Power Supplies. Never buy these new. It's not worth it. The large majority of the value in these things is batteries. And once the batteries are not working, well, companies just get rid of them. They throw them away. But these are valuable pieces of equipment. They're like $2,000 new. I picked up each of these for like less than $100 and then spent a couple $100s on new batteries because the new batteries are just lead acid car batteries, basically. They're skinnier. They're motorcycle batteries technically, but it doesn't matter. You buy the new batteries, you put them in here, and you are set and off to the races. So the end result is, well, 2 very cheap universal power supplies that can power this entire rack for 45 minutes, which is more than enough time to shut everything down in the event of a power outage. And then everything else in here is silver. Why? Well, it's all from the same company. They call them the Apple of networking. I don't know that that's true, but Ubiquiti is a fantastic company, and my love affair started with them like 3 or 4 years ago when I first purchased this. This is the Dream Machine Pro, and it is, in essence, a fancy pants router. They call it a gateway because it does a lot more than route traffic, although it does do that, and it does it in a far more sophisticated and advanced way than any router you would find in a kind of a home deployment. But it also does a bunch of things like run wireless access points and our voice over IP telephones, as well as our door access control and our many security cameras that we have around the building and inside the building. And thanks to this box right here, we can store a crazy amount of footage. There is one hard drive in the Dream Machine Pro that you can use to record locally with all of your video footage. But if you've got a lot of cameras and or you want several weeks and months of backup, well, this is the thing to have. You put 7 hard drives in 7 slots, and it gives you all of the storage you could possibly need for your video cameras and more. Other than that, we've just got these 2 pieces of gear, and they're both switches. Now, you might be wondering, that is a lot of slots for what is ultimately probably not going to be that very many plugs in the Snazzy Labs office. And you're right. The benefit is that, well, for one, this will scale with us as our company gets bigger, but because these 2 switches perform very different functions. This bottom one is called the USW Pro, and it provides power over Ethernet. Yes, you can send power over an Ethernet cable to power wireless access points, our telephones, our door access control, and more. There's a bunch of cool stuff you can use PoE for. You can even have PoE breakouts to charge stuff over USB-C. Like, it's crazy the stuff you can do with PoE, and this switch permits for that. Then on the top, we've got our newest acquisition, and that's actually replacing this. This is our Arista 4050T. This is a 15 almost year old piece of gear that I bought from a liquidator that came out of a data center. This thing is a beast. It has 48 10 gigabit Ethernet ports, and then it's got 4 quad SFP 40 gigabit ports. I bought this for like a few $100s. They've actually gone up in value as they've become more popular, but I'm getting rid of this thing because, well, because it's 15 years old, it uses a lot older technology. And this thing at idle uses like 300 watts of power, which is very expensive on a power bill. The other problem is that it's really freaking loud. I have tried to use like Noctua fans as a replacement, but it's still louder than all get out. And this new Enterprise XG from Ubiquiti, well, it fixes all of that. It gives us 24 10 gigabit Ethernet ports, which is more than anyone could need, and it gives us 2 25 gigabit SFP ports. The most fantastic thing about this is, look, it's not cheap, it's $1,300, but relative to everything else on the market, this thing is a bargain, and it is consistently sold out because it is one of the best value 10 gig switches on the market, and I am really excited to have one. There is one thing that Ubiquiti products don't have, and it's always been a little weird to me. In any other piece of enterprise networking gear, you will have removable power supplies. Ubiquiti stuff doesn't have that. They're all built in. And so in the event that your power supply inside one of these pieces of gear fails, you don't want it to take your whole network down. So they sell what's called an RPS, a redundant power supply. And with these massive 24-pin connector cables, you can plug the RPS into any one or all of these pieces of gear. And in the event that one of these has a failed power supply, well, it'll just start running off of the RPS until you can replace that specific piece of gear. Pretty good invention, but pretty weird that they just don't do stuff with external power supplies like everyone else. I guess the real reason, frankly, this is the reason, cost. Because everything else will come with 2 power supplies. You're paying double just in the event that one fails, it can keep running. That's what the RPS does. And if you're in a home deployment or in a small office and you don't need to have 2 power supplies in every device, well, you save money and you get stuff for cheaper, like this $1,300 switch that would probably cost $3 grand from anyone else. Before I plug everything in, I'm now going to do this with short little 1-foot patch cables. These bad guys right here. I do need to make sure that all of my cables, well, were terminated correctly. And there are 2 pieces of gear that will help you do that. This first one is one that you probably won't need because it's for fancy pants, but it's called a toner. If you've got a lot of cables that you have installed in your house, it's really good at helping you find something quickly. So I've got a repeater plugged into one cable somewhere in my office, but I don't know which one it is. So I can just take this wand and rub it in front, and as soon as it starts to make a noise, I can get into the precision mode, and then I actually put it inside each slot. So that's a number 2, but if I put it here, that's a number 7. So the stronger the signal, the more confident it is that this is the cable you want to talk to. So this cable that's plugged in on the other end is number 20 right here. That's pretty cool. But you probably don't need a toner. You'll just need one of these. And this is called the cable tester. This one's from Klein. It's fancy. It's got a screen on it. Yours probably won't need that at all. They sell these for like 20 bucks. But all it does is you take a cable, you plug it into your patch panel, and then once you've done that, it'll tell you, hey, I've ID'd this cable. It checks the other end of the cable. And not only can you measure the length, so this is a 1-foot cable. Well, that's not right. A 50-foot cable, but it also tells you, there you go, 67. It just took a minute. It also tells you if the cable has been installed correctly, which this one hasn't. Hang on, we got to go fix this cable. Okay, so the problem was pretty obvious. We went over, we pulled the keystone off, and we found that, yep, sure enough, 2 of our cables that we had punched down, we punched down a little too aggressively, and they had sheared off the connector. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, those were all connected to their proper pins, but 1 and 2 were just gone. So if we turn this off and then turn it back on and run the test again, it should give us a passing grade. And it does. Okay, problem fixed. Everything's good to go. Let's put the patch cables in. 5 minutes and a lot of drywall dust later, and I have crudely installed my wireless access point for Wi-Fi. Now, I'm going to clean up the install a little bit later. I just wanted to test and make sure that this thing would work. But I think it will, because it is a long-range model, which is great for traveling long distances. And then this is also a fairly small office, and this is a very centralized access point. As long as you don't have obstacles like brick and cement and plaster in the way, you've just got drywall, these access points work really, really great. My home has several because it's a very old house with bodies in the wall, I think. Very dense materials that's hard to get radio waves through. But this will do just fantastically. Now I want to talk about this very expensive rack. This thing, all told with shipping, cost me about $3,500, which is, I don't like to think about it, but I had to do it because we record on the other side of this wall. It's just 2 sheets of drywall, a couple of 4-inch studs, and that's it. Not ideal. And this is what happens when you power on server equipment. Now, this is pretty loud, and keep in mind that I have specifically selected the most quiet equipment I can find. That's one of the reasons why I got rid of this Arista switch on top. But even with really quiet equipment, it's not that quiet because, well, physics. There are a lot of fans moving a lot of air, and it's going to be loud. Hence this enclosure. This, as you can tell, is covered in sound insulating foam everywhere, on the doors, on the floor, on the sides, on the ceilings, and more. And its airflow design is really unique, which helps part of the deadening of the sound. Over here is our intake, and there is just a big old grate down at the bottom that sucks the air up inside the enclosure. It goes through the equipment, and I'm going to put in little dampers and baffles to make sure that the only option for the air is to go through the equipment. And then as it gets into the back of the server, there are actually exhaust fans that intake the air, and then they run through a little tiny maze that is covered in foam. And as the air crashes from one side into another, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And the result is that when I close these doors, while not perfect, it is a lot quieter. I am going to do even more to make this even quieter, but as it stands right now, we could totally record. I mean, I'm standing right next to it, and it's pretty good. In the other room, it's not a problem. And if I want to, I can close this door to make it even quieter. It is a very expensive solution to a problem that I created by moving into this office, but it's one that I'm pretty happy with. And while $3,000 is a lot of money, this is a very heavy-duty rack that I see myself sticking with for many, 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 many years to come. This is Wi-Fi access, and it solves the single biggest issue I have with this office. We are directly above a record store, and for whatever reason, despite my greatest efforts, people will always mistake us for the record store. They come in, they come up the stairs, it's like, this is obviously not a record store. They ruin our recordings, it's a bummer. So we have just resorted to leaving our door locked all the time. But we do get deliveries and stuff every day, and we have to run down the stairs, unlock the door, and then let people in and hope that they're still there. This system is going to fix all that, and it will be done with the help of this, an electric door strike that we're going to install in the door. And the process is very simple. Someone will come up to the door, there's this fancy pants doorbell, they swipe to call, and then on both my phone, on Benjamin's phone, and on our computers, we will be notified that someone's at the door. We can have a two-way conversation with them, communicate with them, see who it is, and then if we decide, yeah, we want to let them in, I just press unlock, and this door lock will open right up. They can come inside, and then once they leave, the door locks right behind them. Simple as that. How do we get in the building, though? Well, the traditional way of doing door access is with NFC cards or RFID badges. The cool thing about Ubiquiti is you can use any NFC card you want. This is my Rivian car key, and it even says your name. Isn't that fun? But the reality is that this is pretty much an antiquated way of doing things. UID is their new system. It allows you to have your own personalized Wi-Fi password. It's super cool for enterprise stuff. And one of the benefits of UID is low energy Bluetooth door access. And so all we got to do is have our phone in our pocket, walk up to the door, it unlocks, and then it locks behind us. It's going to be awesome, and I can't wait to get this installed. What are you still doing here? The video's done. I'm a week behind schedule. This took way too long. Be gone with you. Go watch one of the other videos that I talked about, or get subscribed for future videos. Stay snazzy. Now get out of my office. Leave. Go. Go watch Marquez or someone, okay?